infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Welcome to another episode of Into the Fray. If you're new here, I hope you're enjoying it enough to head to your podcatcher of choice to rate and review the show. This helps it aggregate across the listening platforms, which will turn into more people willing to come on and share their encounters. If you've been listening for years, I'd ask that you please do the same. Home base for Into the Fray is intothefrayradio.com. There you will find all episodes, blog posts, and get bonus content info. Speaking of that bonus content, on top of the free weekly show, I also produce bonus content for Patreon and Apple Podcasts Premium. On either platform, you get all bonus audio episodes and early releases, each one ad-free, of course. Full disclosure, though, Patreon has a bit more in the way of perks because of their interface. Over there, you will get video versions of patron-only chats, the private Discord channel, and merch at certain pledge levels. So head to patreon.com/intothefray or your Apple Podcatcher app to sign up for bonus content today. You can find me on the big three social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The Linktree link in each of my bios will take you to all the places you want to venture regarding ITF, including Small Town Monsters documentaries, various ways to listen to the show, Beyond the Fray books, contact info for me, and more. And lastly, and really honestly, most importantly, if you'd like to share your encounter or encounters on Into the Fray, the best way to get in touch is by emailing me at shannon@intothefrayradio.com. And without further ado, let's get to the interview. So on this edition of Into the Fray, I welcome Norm on with me. And he and I have been following each other on social media for quite a long while. And we've been in touch. And finally he said, I want to come on and share my experiences with you. And I'm very, very happy that he has decided to do so. Norm, welcome on the show.
Seven.
So I know that we are going to cover a couple of different subjects, and I don't know if you wanted to start with the one that you really reached out to me for, or if you wanted to go in succession. Maybe they happen to go that way. I don't know. But we have a couple different subjects to cover. So I don't know where you wanted to start with that, but that is up to you.
Well, why not start there? Back in 1996, I was in North Idaho with a friend that I work with, and we were hunting for elk and white-tailed deer. And we had set up camp and got an early start in the morning, headed out in different directions. And I went up a ridge behind our camp and started hunting through there. The weather was kind of sleeting. It was really cold, and in between rain and snow falling, so everything was completely drenched and wet. Wasn't too long before I was soaked to the bone and really cold, so I stopped underneath a big pine tree, ripped off some lower branches. I started a little fire, got warm, got dry. At that point, I felt pretty comfortable on heading out again, and within a minute or two, I was soaked to the bone again. So I thought, I'm going to get down off this ridge because it's pretty uncomfortable up here. So I headed down off the ridge and made my way down towards a logging road that was below there. And I got to the bottom of the hill, stepped onto the logging road, and immediately I heard this horrendous, bone-chilling combination of a scream and a roar coming from across the road and a little, not really a valley, but a clearing kind of area before the hill on the other side started. And it was coming from a stand of aspen trees. And I stopped dead in my tracks. It was the most frightening thing I'd ever heard in my life, and it was really loud. And it coming from those trees, and I looked, and the trees were shaking, and they were pretty tall. Some of them are 25, 30 feet tall, and they were being violently shaken from inside that stand of trees, and I couldn't figure out what in the world it was. But I raised my rifle up because I thought whatever is in there doesn't like me being here, and if it comes charging out, at least I'll have a drop on it, because it was maybe 50 yards away, so I could have easily drawn a bead on it and shot it, and I would have. If something had come out of there at me, I would have shot it, no problem whatsoever. But luckily for it and luckily for me, it didn't. But as I stood there, my rifle up to my shoulder and just frozen stiff with a combination of intense anticipation and probably some fright mixed in with that. Probably that scream lasted a good 10 seconds straight. It was a volume that I'd never heard in my life, coming from any kind of animal, and no forest animal that I'm familiar with makes that kind of noise. I've heard over my years of hunting here in Idaho, I've heard just about every animal that you can imagine make their normal sounds, and that wasn't any sound that ever came from an animal I'm familiar with. It was very loud. It was like a combination of the roar of a lion, the roar of an elephant, not the trumpeting of an elephant, the roar that they make, and a woman screaming. And it had a human quality to it. And I would say that the human quality of it was female. It was the voice. It wasn't voice. It wasn't an animal's cry. It was a voice, but it was roaring so loud. It was incredible. And so I watched that area of the trees for a while, expecting something to come out of it. And after 10 or 15 seconds, I heard a sound off to my right, something coming down the hill that I had just come down. And I turned my head over there, and there was a bull moose coming down that little hill, and he made his way down to the road about 20 feet to my right. And he stopped and stood there for a few seconds, and then headed off across the road and down into that kind of a little valley. It wasn't a very deep valley, but it was a sort of a valley that led downhill towards the right. And he didn't head towards those aspen trees where the sound had been coming from. He headed sort of angling into that little valley, but not towards the trees. And when he did that, the roaring stopped and didn't start up again. And I continued to watch the stand of aspen trees for a while to see if they were going to start shaking again, or if there was going to be more roaring coming from in there. And there wasn't for a while, so finally I felt safe, like I could maybe head back up the road toward our camp and not have to be too worried about something coming out of there and taking off after me. So that was pretty much that encounter. I didn't see what was making the sound, but from what I've heard over the years from other people reporting sounds that Bigfoot make, I'm pretty sure that that's what it was. I'm pretty sure that that was a Sasquatch in that bunch of trees. And would I have liked to have seen it? I don't know. It was pretty frightening. I don't know if I want to see anything that could make a noise like that. That was the most frightening noise I ever heard in my life.
Now, did you ever go back there to hunt?
I haven't been back there since then. That area of North Idaho is not far from the town of St. Mary's and the St. Joe River drainage up that way. It's a nice place to go. It's a long ways from Boise, and that's primarily why I haven't been back there. It's about a 400-mile drive. But we headed out of there pretty close after that in time. I was really cold and bordering on hypothermia, so I convinced my hunting partners that maybe we should go back to Boise, and we loaded up camp in the truck and headed back.
Did you share the encounter with your hunting partners or ask if they had heard anything?
I didn't share it with anybody for many years. I kept that to myself. And a few people that I have shared it with have been kind of mixed in their reactions over the years. My wife kind of, yeah, I don't know if she believes it or not. She kind of takes those things with a grain of salt. But I'll tell you what, I was kind of frightened, and I don't want to be frightened like that again. That was a heart pounding experience. But no, I hadn't shared with my hunting partner or very many people in the 26 years or so, 27 years that have intervened between then and now.
Yeah, as I've said before, you go out on a limb and maybe you get that look or you get that tone from somebody and it teaches you really quickly just to tuck it back in.
Yeah. Yeah, and been in some fairly responsible positions in state government, and I didn't want word to get around that this guy that we rely upon for leadership and so forth has been seeing or hearing Bigfoot. So,
Right.
yeah, I just kind of kept that close to the vest.
Now, had you been out to that area before for any reason, including hunting?
No, I've been to Coeur d'Alene before, which is not far from there, and a lot of areas south of there. I've hunted in Idaho County, which is south of there, and biggest county in the state, and a lot of forest, and from there on down into this local area around here in Boise National Forest and stuff. But I have not hunted in that area since then.
Now, considering the weather, I would imagine that if there had been people, maybe they cleared out. I don't know what kind of if it was an ongoing system in the forecast, that kind of thing. But did you guys notice any other people there besides you?
In those days, we were a smaller state and population-wise, and it wasn't uncommon to go somewhere and be able to hunt and essentially not see anyone for days and days. So it was just my hunting partner and I.
It's so nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, what about the area itself? Is it how well, I guess I'm asking how remote is it? Is it close to any campgrounds or where people can pull trailers and set up or hiking trails, anything like that?
Not really. It's pretty primitive country back in there. The roads that there are basically logging roads, and so if you don't have a four-wheel drive, probably not going to get very far up into that country. At least back then, I don't know how developed it is now, but it's national forest in there, and we drove up a logging road as far as we could to make camp, and just kind of pulled off into a wide spot there and parked the outfit and made our camp. So it wasn't a really very populated area, and as I said, we didn't see anybody else the whole time we were there.
So when the scream is going off and the tree is shaking, did the word Bigfoot flash in your mind at all at that time or just after?
I didn't have any idea what it was. It was just frightening, and I know what kind of animals inhabit that part of the state, and there's grizzly bears up there, and black bears, and moose, and elk, and deer, and so forth. But no animal on that list makes that kind of noise. I had no idea what it was. Bigfoot did not enter my mind at that point.
So when did Bigfoot enter your mind for that encounter?
Probably, oh, I don't know, months or years later. I mean, I've been around a while, and I remember Patterson Gimlin episode down at Bluff Creek as far as when that was published, and I've seen that video a number of times, and Patty and so forth, and I've heard people comment on that, and I've heard and followed other people who've reported experiences with Bigfoot, including on your program. I've listened to every one of your podcasts from first to the most recent, but my favorite ones involve Bigfoot, and so I've heard other people describe sounds that Bigfoot has made, like whooping sounds, and I've listened to, I think it was Brandon, who had an experience with a couple of his friends in Montana, and there was some kind of creature fairly close that he called a chuffing sound. I haven't heard that before, but I've listened to a number of people describe what they've heard, and I actually have heard one or two people describe a roar that Bigfoot makes, similar in quality and tonality to what I heard. So that kind of makes me feel better about maybe that's what it was as opposed to something else that it couldn't have been. I mean, there's no other animal I know of in the forest that makes that kind of noise.
Especially at that volume, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine anything having that kind of lung power to project volume like that across 50 yards. And I mean, it was loud enough to be scary in and of itself, regardless of the quality of the sound and what it sounded like. But it was loud enough to be startling and that far away. A tremendous amount of lung powering, whatever made that.
Yeah, it sounds like you were kind of close to getting to an experience that would be on the no list, since it did seem a little ticked off that you were there. So as you say, you admitted, which I don't blame you. I'm okay. I didn't see it. I don't know if I'd want to actually see what was making that sound or go forward with that encounter on the other side of what that could have been.
There was no way I was going to cross that open area and go see what it was. And if it had come out at me, I would have shot it, and then we would have had a body of something. But as it turned out, lucky for it and lucky for me, that didn't have to happen. So I don't believe in going out and hunting these creatures and killing one just to find out what they are. I'm not in favor of doing that, but I certainly would have defended myself.
The moose making its way down, either it, and maybe this is me just asking your opinion on this, but it seemed like it didn't notice it going on, or it didn't mind that it was going on, or I don't know, which one of those two do you think was happening there?
It stopped when it got down to the road where I was, and it didn't really pay much attention to me, even though it was, just 20 feet away or so in a fairly big bull. But it stopped right there, and at that point the scream was still happening. And then, not too long, seconds wise, after the moose stopped there on the road, close to me, then the scream stopped, and then it kind of just started to amble away at that point. It wasn't in any hurry to get anywhere, but it strode across the road and out into that field and sort of at a quartering angle, maybe a 45-degree angle to the stand of aspen trees and out into that valley. And I didn't watch it after that. I wanted out of there. And when the scream stopped, I sort of hightailed it.
So when the screams were going down and the shaking of the trees, you say you raised your rifle. Did you just raise it, have it at the ready, or did you actually scope the area that was being disturbed to try to see, if you could tell what was going down over there?
Scope on that rifle, that was a Mini 30, which is like a Mini 14, but it takes a 7.62 by 39 cartridge. And I was carrying it because of the heaviness of the brush around there. There's no point in having a scope because I wasn't going to get a shot more than 20, 30 yards. So having a scope was not on the program. I had a scoped rifle with me on that trip, but I chose not to carry it on that excursion. So no, I had my rifle raised and at my shoulder, and I was looking down the sights, waiting for something to come out, because whatever it was something I didn't want to meet up with up close and personal. So I was ready.
Yeah, that sounds like a tense situation, and not that you probably know exactly where your hunting partners are, but I mean, do you guys usually try to have a certain amount of distance between you, or did you already have pre-planned spots, or how did that, like, if something really went down, how alone or how far would you have been from someone that could have maybe come to your aid?
We split up and we went different directions. I know that he was, probably within a mile or so of wherever I was, but in terms of exactly where he might have been, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But if things had gotten bad, I would have, fired off 3 shots and a standard distress signal, and I'm sure he would have homed in on that eventually. But I have no idea where it was.
That's true. 96. We don't have all the fancy fangled, easy GPS stuff that we can carry in our pockets as we do nowadays, right?
Not then, no way. And since that time, there's been I think I sent you a link to a site where some mushroom hunter had purportedly recorded a Bigfoot scream, and then a sound expert had matched that up with a soundtrack from a dinosaur movie. And I had a short discussion online with someone who, thought that that's what it was that I heard, and I responded to that person that back in 1996 in that part of the country, in essentially wilderness territory, there weren't any people broadcasting dinosaur movie soundtracks into the air where hunters might do so. I had to poo-poo that idea, but it was similar to that what was portrayed on that particular video, but there were missing elements, and as I described to you, there were three distinct sounds coming out of that roar, and one or two of those was missing from the dinosaur soundtrack.
Yeah, I will actually link that video that you shared with me. Thank you for doing that, by the way, in the show notes. So anybody that would like to hear, it's similar. He's saying this is not spot on. And besides, he already said this was admittedly a guy trying to pass off, oh, I heard a Bigfoot while going out hunting mushrooms. But it was pulled from a dinosaur video or movie at some point. So that is admitted. But he's saying it's similar. Go to the show notes for this episode at intothefrayradio.com and you can check that out. Yeah, as far as strange sounds, when I was in Kentucky, and actually I'm going to be talking to Ramona shortly. She was out there with me in Kentucky years and years ago when we went to a property out there that had some active Bigfoot stuff going down. We heard a strange sound from the brush at ground level, and it was much as you described. You're kind of going, well, it kind of sounded like a screwed up bird, but gosh dang, that's a huge bird, but it sounds like a dinosaur or a pterodactyl, or you can't quite put your finger on just one thing at all.
The one thing that I can say about the roar that I heard is it had, and I mentioned it earlier, it had a human quality. There was a human element in that scream. A human vocalization or human voice box was part of making that up. But it was so much more than that. It was well beyond anything that a human being could produce, but it had a human quality to it. I don't know if that makes any sense to you or not. I think I've heard, I think I might have heard you mention something about the sound having a female element to it.
Yes.
One of the shows I've listened to recently.
Yes, absolutely. When we went to Washington State to the Brown property, we were playing the baby cries, and then the whoop started. It was just like a human being, a female human being with a massive set of lungs, just whooping away, just in threes, always in threes. But yes, exactly. That's when you said that was where my mind went.
Sound again.
You don't want to hear it again? Sorry, it stepped on you.
No, I think I'm too old right now. I might clutch my chest and fall from a heart attack or something. I mean, that was so frightening.
Yeah.
And I've been in a lot of frightening positions or potentially frightening positions in my careers, but nothing like that. That was scary. I thought I was either going to be a gunner or going to have to shoot something that I had never seen before.
Did that change your outdoor activities at all for a while?
No, I continued to hunt. I just never hunted up there again, but that wasn't necessarily because of that encounter. It was more logistical. I found it cheaper to hunt closer to home. There's been a couple of times in the local area, I was thinking Boise National Forest and also up around McCall, Idaho, where I've been hunting and felt just a really oppressive feeling of being watched, and I couldn't key that into anything that I saw or heard. I didn't hear any footsteps or sounds or anything else, but something was watching me. And I stopped at one point when I was hunting up above Idaho City in Boise County. I had that feeling so strong. I stopped in my tracks and I looked all around really carefully up the hillsides and all these stumps that are sticking up and trees, and I couldn't find anything. But it was really an oppressive feeling. It almost made me go back to my outfit and leave the area. It was so strong. And then up and around McCall, when I was hunting there, I felt that same feeling, and I found a tree that had been burned out. Apparently lightning hit it or something, and it had a big hollow down at the bottom of it. And I went and sat in that hollow, and I just was waiting to see if something came by. And after half an hour sitting there or something, nothing came around. So I got out and continued to hunt. But those are a couple of times when I wasn't able to determine what was watching me, but I knew something was. On previous occasions, I caught another hunter watching me through the scope of his rifle, and I had words with him. And on one other occasion, I had that feeling of being watched. It turned out to be a mountain lion, and I saw it standing on a boulder behind me, and as soon as I turned around and looked at it, it took off. So,
Oh my God.
So a feeling of being watched is a real thing. I'm a big believer that we have that ability to sense when somebody's looking at us or something is looking at us. So I put a lot of stock in that on those two occasions I described in Boise County and up in McCall. I never did see what it was.
So that instance where you climbed into the hollowed out tree, that was 100% to conceal yourself because you felt that threatened?
Right. That's exactly what it was. I thought something was coming. As I say, I couldn't hear anything like footsteps or, animal noises or anything, but I sure felt like something was watching me. And so I thought I'd just conceal myself in there and see if it came by on the path or on the trail. And nothing ever did. So I finally popped out of there and continued what I was doing.
It must be an awful feeling. I've had kind of sort of that feeling in a couple of locations I've gone to, but not to the point where, well, in your original encounter where you're going, well, shoot, something's going to come out of the brush and rip me up and I have to shoot it and try to save myself, or to where you have this feeling you have to conceal yourself and climb into a hollowed out tree. That is really kind of a crappy situation.
I mean, I was a little spooked by it. That everything came out all right. I wondered, for a while what it was going to turn out to be.
Yeah. It is cool though that I know that our primal instincts, I would assume, has been really muted down over many, many, many years, but it is still in there, and it can be quite useful at times.
Big believer in it. I don't know if it's a sixth sense or what, but I think it's a very useful thing to have when you're out in the woods and there's critters out there. Besides, we can set Bigfoot to the side for a while. Where I live, there's things that can eat you. It's a good feeling to have to be aware that something might be watching you.
That mountain lion story gave me chills, though. It could have been moments away from trying to pounce on you.
It was in a good position to pounce on me. It would have been a fairly big jump. I'm sure it could have made it, but it was probably 15 feet to that boulder that it was sitting on or standing on. I turned around and saw it, and it turned tail and took off into the brush. But it might have been something up to pounce on me. I don't know.
That is terrifying. That is 100% terrifying. So, Glenn, do you think that there would be a quote-unquote perfect sighting or perfect encounter with a Bigfoot that then you would go, yeah, I'd like to see it in this case? Like, would that be from a vehicle or whatever that might be? Have you thought about that? And you go, well, yeah, I'd like to see it, but...
I have thought about that, and I probably would if it were far enough away, and I don't go out into the forest without being armed, so I'd have my means of self-defense if I needed it. But as I say, I wouldn't go out hunting these creatures. I don't believe that that's something that we need to be doing. But yeah, as long as I had a means of self-defense and then there was a good enough distance between us, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing one. I mean, it certainly would be a tale to tell, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, your story alone is a tale to tell. I mean, I've had the same thing where it's these auditory experiences. You can't say for sure what it was, but it's something that really changes you and it makes you go, oh my gosh, these might actually really be out there. So this was in October of 96, right? So I'm not really up on hunting seasons and all of that. And if you don't remember exactly, it's not a problem. But I was just wondering if you recall what the opening and closing of hunting season would have been at that time. I don't know if it's still the same, but when was the open and close of that? Do you remember?
That area of North Idaho usually opens up in September for rifles, well, for any weapon, but for rifle season. And it has a really long season that closes typically in December. And what people hunt up there is elk and white-tailed deer and also bears. And so we were after elk and deer.
Yeah, that is pretty long. So you've got several months of people out in the woods traipsing around with high-powered rifles. I'm just wondering if that Bigfoot at that time, and of course it's a game of needle in the haystack and right place or wrong place at the right place or wrong time, but I'm wondering if that particular, whatever it was, I just said Bigfoot, but we don't know for sure, but we're assuming, because I don't know what else makes that sound. I've heard something very similar, and it's a stunner. I wish everybody could hear it. Then you'd start to believe. But with the weather the way that it was, I'm wondering if that particular Bigfoot was like, the hairless things aren't really going to be out today because this weather's really crappy, and then here you are with the bang stick, with the boomstick, and he's going, well, what the hell, man? I thought I was going to be in the clear with this weather.
And so I don't know if it was a he or a she, it sounded female, but then that's just an objective, or I guess a subjective observation. Might have been hunting itself. I don't know. It could have been out there after deer, or maybe been for a moose or something. Although I wouldn't want to tangle with a bull moose, even if I was a Bigfoot. They're pretty ornery when they want to be.
That's a good point then, Glenn. If male or female, but if you say it had a female tone, then I have heard that same thing, and I have always said that was a female, assuming Bigfoot. Don't know for sure, didn't see what made the sound, but maybe you did then just get in the way of it wanting to go after that bull moose. Again, like you said, those things are huge and crazy. Anyone just look up a couple of bull mooses fighting. There was a recent one that I came across. Don't know if it's a new video, but it was two bull mooses fighting in the front yard of a guy's house. And it was annihilating two vehicles sitting in the driveway, and one of them ended up in the bed of his truck. Thank God he had the video, because I don't think the insurance company would believe that one. But anyhow, I'm wondering if you just that's a good point that you just made. Maybe you just came in between it and some hunting, or if it was a female, maybe there was a juvenile around, so it was letting you know, hey, you're getting a little too close to my house here.
Yeah, could have been a baby though. Who knows? I imagine that if it were a she, then she would be very protective of her young, just like a human mother would be. So.
Yeah, and then it makes you think how many more were around there, possibly, right? Just keeping an eye on you.
Yeah, and back in those days, I didn't pay much attention to footprints or anything like that. I mean, I looked for tracks of the animals that I was hunting, but I wouldn't have said, well, I wonder if I can find a Bigfoot footprint in here. I never have looked for any. So had I been looking, maybe I would have found some around there. I don't know. It wasn't any animal I'm familiar with, and after all these years, I'm pretty sure it probably was a Sasquatch, but I can't say for certain because I didn't see it.
Right. Have you seen online or anybody talking about on another podcast where they have actually reported in that very same, a very close vicinity, very small diameter of a Bigfoot report from that area?
Dave Paulides has identified that area of Idaho as being, I don't know what he calls those areas of focus where there have been reports. So not necessarily that same mountain that we were on, but that area of North Idaho has had Bigfoot reports before. Sure, we've had them all over the state.
Yeah,
certainly up there in North Idaho and the Panhandle, they have their share of sightings reported.
I've always wanted to go up to Idaho. McCall is where there's a lot of multi-million-dollar homes out there, isn't there?
It's actually a fairly small town, except for tourism and stuff. There aren't very many people that live there year-round. Maybe 1,000 people, something like that. Tourism is the big industry there, both for Pitt Lake and also nearby Brundage Mountain, which is a destination ski resort.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because especially encounters like this, I really identify with them because that's all I've had in the way of quote-unquote Bigfoot encounters is the auditory stuff. But as I said before, even that, as you can agree, can be enough to sway you more in the yes camp, in the they are out there camp. Okay, so switching gears.
Yeah.
And did you want to close out any thoughts on that one, Norm?
Well, I'm in that camp. I believe that there's a creature out there that we don't know what it is scientifically. Hasn't been identified in the traditional Linnaean classification system, and we don't have any body or a captive one or anything like that to look at. Now, I'm familiar with Dr. Ketchum and her study and results that they published, but that's one line of evidence, but we just don't have a body or a living creature to point at and say, okay, here, everybody that thought Bigfoot was real, you're right, here he is. But yeah, I'm in the camp of they exist, and I'm in the camp of I don't know what they are. Are they hominin? Are they an ape of some kind? I don't know. Don't know. If I had to go on the quality of the roar that I heard, I would have to say that they're at least partly human, because that was a human voice making that roar, but it was so much more than that.
Yeah, I think that's a good camp to be in. You might have your toes a little bit more on one or the other, but you keep an open mind with stuff, because we just don't know. And there are no experts in this field. But there are a lot of people doing a lot of good work. I will say that. No matter what camp it is, at least they're full bore on that, and bless them for that, because they're actually trying to do some work and push it forward. So bravo to anybody that is attempting that. It's not easy, especially once you go online with anything. It can be very difficult.
3.5%.
Well, Norm, what would you like to discuss next?
No, the big hairy guy is my favorite thing to look into, but I've had some sightings of UFOs over the years that have been kind of interesting. Maybe we could talk a little bit about some of those.
Absolutely.
Well, I sent you some pictures and graphics that I made that represent some of the sightings that I've had. Years ago, when I was working in a particular job that was pretty stressful, we used to have a jacuzzi out on the back deck. And when I come home from working, I would go get in that and soak for a while and just look up at the stars on a clear night. And on 2 different occasions, I saw this thing come streaking across the sky from west to east. And so it made the arc of the visible sky that I could see overhead was maybe 50, 60 degrees. And it crossed that arc of sky just in an instant, less than a second. It was just completely silent. It appeared to be fairly large. It wasn't something that I saw like it was at a great distance away. It was either really close in terms of how high above my head it was, or it was really large, one or the other. But it was 3 lights in a triangular formation. I couldn't see anything solid in between them, but I'm thinking that it was probably some kind of craft that had these 3 lights underneath it. And they were shaped like a poached egg. The lights were the kind of poached egg that you would cook in a pan that's made for that, so they come out perfectly round. So the yolk would be in the middle, and then the white would be around the yolk. And so for the yolk part of the poached egg look was kind of a soft fluorescent blue, and then the white part, where the white of the yolk or white of the egg would be, was a lighter colored fluorescent blue. These both occasions just streaked across the sky. It just almost appeared from nowhere and just blazed across the sky and was gone in just less than a second. No noise or nothing. I sent you that graphic, and I think if you were to print that out and hold that out at arm's length, then those 3 circles that you see there, that's how big they would have appeared in reality as they went over. They would have been that big. That happened on 2 different nights, probably separated by a week or 2, when I was out there relaxing in the jacuzzi, looking up at the sky. The first sighting that I had was better in quality because it lasted longer. The second one was exactly the same kind of craft, whatever it was, but the sighting didn't last quite as long as the first one.
And it was the same path each time?
Yes, it's going west to east. Now, it's interesting to note, and I don't know if this had anything to do with it or not, but we have an Air Force base about 40 miles east of here, the Mountain Home Air Force Base. And they were sort of headed in that direction, but they could have been, headed for any particular destination. I have no idea what their itinerary was. But
yeah, like Mars, right?
Yeah, they were going a warp factor of some speed, that's for sure. They were moving. I've never seen anything go that fast.
I remember the graphic is it okay if I put the graphic that you made in the show notes as well?
Absolutely.
Because I can see that in my mind, and I can imagine holding that out. That would be big. That would really be impressive.
Yeah, they weren't tiny. It wasn't like I was looking up at just pinpoints in the sky. This was something big, either really close to the ground or really big and high up. I don't know which it was, but I couldn't see any structure, so I'm thinking that it was higher up rather than closer to the ground.
Right. And silent. Isn't that so strange when when you're going, that seems like it'd be large, and how can it be completely silent?
Yeah, not even a whisper from it. And another time, I was out working in the area of Meridian, Idaho, which is a little town about 10 or 11 miles west of here, of where I live in Boise. And I was coming back on the Interstate 84, between Meridian and Boise, and approaching the Boise airport area. And the interstate runs right alongside of it. And so I see this silvery gray object that appeared, at first I thought it was a military parachute or something, because I couldn't figure out what else it would be. But it was about 100 feet in diameter and maybe 50 feet off the ground. And hanging or descending from the center of it underneath was this one. It looked like a string of yarn. It looked fuzzy. It was black and it looked fuzzy, like, how yarn looks. And then at the bottom of that, there was something attached to that yarn looking string that was rectangular in shape and also black and fuzzy. And it wasn't quite touching the ground. So I thought this was maybe a military parachute, because the Boise Air Terminal shares its runways with the Idaho Air National Guard. And so there's military activity out there. F-10 Warthogs are based there, and also Apache helicopters and so forth. So I thought, well, the military is dropping some kind of thing by parachute on the end of the runway. And then I thought, why would they do that? This is a very active airport. We have airlines taking off and landing here all the time. Why would they essentially block one end of the runway with something like that? And then I looked at it for longer as I was approaching it, and I thought, there's no shroud lines. A parachute would have shroud lines attached to something. And it wasn't descending, it was hovering, and parachutes don't hover. So I got the best look at it as I could as I'm traveling along the interstate at 65 miles an hour, watched it for as long as I could, and still, be safe in traffic and not wandering all over the lanes. I didn't see it depart or anything, and I didn't see how it got there. But it definitely was not a parachute, and it remains in the unidentified category as far as I'm concerned, but it wasn't anything that I'm familiar with that the military would have or that they would be using.
What shape was the silvery object?
It was circular, like a classic saucer. It was sort of domed at the top. I mean, not a dome at the very top, but flat on the bottom and dome shaped, circular.
That's a strange one. I don't know if I've quite ever heard anything like that, especially the fuzzy aspect of the quote unquote yarn, the string hanging down, and then also the rectangular object underneath was also fuzzy.
Yeah. Oh. I've never seen anything like it before or since.
What time of day was this?
Broad daylight. It was probably mid-afternoon. Not a particularly busy time for the airport. They have their busy times where planes are coming and going like crazy, but right then it wasn't. That, this is what kind of anchored it, in my opinion, as not being anything military that I know of, because it was not going anywhere. It wasn't going up. It wasn't coming down. If it was a parachute, it would have been descending and eventually would have touched the ground and folded up into a big pile of silk. But this was just hanging there in the air about 50 feet off the ground, doing whatever it was doing. I don't know what it was doing.
I would imagine other people had to have seen that thing.
Yeah, there was traffic on the interstate. I don't know, who might have seen it and who didn't. I thought about calling the control tower when I got home and ask them what was going on, but I kind of had other things to do, so I never got around to doing that. I couldn't, right? I guess I didn't think of getting my cell phone out and taking a picture of it. That probably would have been a really good thing to do, but it just didn't cross my mind. I was just enthralled at looking at it and trying to figure out what it was.
Well, you know how those cell phone pics turn out. You take a photo of something that's 10 feet away, you may as well be several yards. Forget it. Like the cell phones, they're very disappointing with their cameras. At least mine is anyway, and it's not like it's old or anything.
It was at the what would be the arrival threshold of runway 10 left at Boise. We have two runways there parallel, and 10 left and 10 right, and then if you're going in the opposite direction is 28 left and right. But I'm a licensed pilot, and so I know a little bit about aircraft and what goes on at airports and so forth, and I've never seen anything like that anywhere I've ever been.
And what year was that?
It was about, I want to say, 10 years ago.
There's just got to be there's no way nobody else saw that. It's just impossible. You're off I-84, right? And the very end of the airport. If anybody saw that thing, please get in touch so I could pass that on to Norm. I'm sure that you would love to hear somebody else that saw that strange craft. What the heck was it doing with that stuff dangling, though? And how in the world would it look fuzzy? Did it look fuzzy as if... Well, the name of it just fell out of my head, but it's what on a hot day you would see that hazy look through on the ground level, right? That what the heck is it called? You know what I'm saying, right?
Mirage.
Yeah, I know. I've used it. If I don't use it, I lose it. I forget the term. But anyway, is that similar to what it looked like?
No, it wasn't that. If I had to describe a quality to the fuzziness, I would have to say it was energy. It wasn't a texture. Like if you touched it, it wouldn't feel fuzzy. It was fuzzy because of energy being in it. That's the impression I got. I don't know why it felt that way, except that I don't believe that it had a fuzzy texture to it, like a rope that is furry like yarn. There was energy in it somehow that was making it look that way. It's like it was a little bit out of phase, I guess. I want to say.
So more like something that would be vibrating violently at a high rate.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, that's probably not what was going on, but my mind's just trying to wrap around because it's such a unique sighting. I don't know that I've ever heard anything quite like that.
Well, that's only my second daylight sighting I've ever had, and remains in the unidentified category. I have no idea what it was.
Sure does.
But it certainly was not a parachute, though.
Yeah, that one is extremely unique. Yeah, well, around 10 years ago, anybody out in that area, if this jogs any memories or pokes any buttons, please get in touch with me because I would love to pass that on to Norm. Well, yeah, any other sightings?
Another daylight sighting my wife and I had. We were going the opposite direction on I-84 from Boise towards Meridian, in an area west of the airport. They have really tall concrete barrier walls there between the freeway and the neighborhoods. And then after a while, that breaks out into more open area and there's trees. So we're driving along and my wife says, "What is that?" And I looked over to where she was looking, and there was this object kind of shaped like a carpenter's square, like a triangle without the long edge on it. And it was kind of just hovering or floating over the area, not moving much. And I didn't get too long of a look at it because I had to pay attention to the road, but she saw it for a while longer than I did. And I had to say, I don't know what that is. I've never seen anything like that. It was three-dimensional and fairly large. I would have to say on a side, it might have been 100 feet or more on a side. And the thickness of it, maybe 20, 30 feet thick, 20 maybe, probably. And just floating silently. Of course, if it was making a noise, we wouldn't have heard it because we're, going freeway speed down the road. So the noise from the car would cover up whatever it was doing. But I would say that at that distance, it was maybe a mile away, mile and a half away when we saw it.
I mean, with you being a licensed pilot, especially in that last sighting, if you take a helicopter and you dangle anything underneath it for any purpose, a person, or if it's a logging operation, that's some of the most dangerous work that you can do, right? So with you being a pilot, your mind is like probably racing to deduce, how's it flying? Why is it flying? Why is it executing XYZ, especially in this location? I mean, that aspect of your profession, you have to kind of be going, well, this is not making sense to me.
Well, I've never seen anything in the air that looked like that. Either the previous one that I described to you, or this one that looked like a right angle or a carpenter's square. There's nothing I know of that looks like that flies. I wouldn't know how it would be up in the air. I mean, there's no, even the brief look at it that I got, there was no engines or propellers or anything being employed to hold it up. Didn't look like any kind of dirigible I've ever seen, or an airship. So it's in the unidentified category. I don't know what it was.
Especially since most all of the craft that we've heard of that falls into this strange category are silent. Besides that, the sheer size and kind of these stranger aspects as to what they're doing, if they are ours, the sheer cost of one of these things would be just astronomical.
So years ago, I lived in another city in Idaho. In fact, I'll just go ahead and say where that was, Pocatello, over in eastern Idaho. And I had occasion to be talking with a friend of mine, and we were parked sort of one car next to the other. So he'd be facing one way and I was facing the other, and we had our windows rolled down. We were talking. And I was looking up at the sky, and I used to be a pretty regular observer of the sky. My dad taught me some constellations and what the major stars were and things like that. And so I had an interest in looking at the sky from a young age. And I just happened to be looking at, and I saw what appeared to be a constellation of three stars shaped in a triangle formation. And I knew that there was no triangular formation of stars in that part of the sky. I'm familiar with where they are primarily, and they're generally much larger than that in terms of apparent distance between the stars, but these are pretty close together. And I thought, what in the world? What is that? I'd never seen that before. And just as I was watching it, it shot off to the west at incredible speed. It was just gone in the blink of an eye. I could see the motion of it in the direction that it went, but to try to follow it in that direction would be impossible. That was a nighttime sighting that I had. I had no idea what that was.
So no sightings when you've actually been piloting something, which is probably good. I don't know that would be the opportune time to see something flying that is not on radar and nobody can say, yeah, it's this and this aircraft.
It was not an aircraft. I've never seen an aircraft go that fast. And why any aircraft would have a triangular arrangement of white lights on it, I don't know. That's not conventional markings for an aircraft. Position lights are certain colors for a reason, and so you'll have one white one on the tail and a red one on the left and a green one on the right. That's pretty much how they're illuminated from a distance.
Now, the sighting with your wife, that when you guys were on I-84, what did she say about that?
She really didn't say too much about it other than just drawing my attention to it. She said, "What is that?" We each looked at it and agreed that we didn't know what it was, but she She didn't speculate on it being a UFO or anything. She just didn't know what it was.
Right. Especially, again, with you being a licensed pilot, does your gut tell you that any of the sightings that you've had, or maybe all of them, I don't know, that they're based here, they're ours, or they're off planet?
Well, I'm not familiar with our secret inventory, if there is one. If the military has things that we don't know about. So I suppose they probably do. And so it could be something of that. But I don't know why they'd be flying those things over populated areas if they're trying to keep them secret. So the 2 daylight sightings that I had, I don't think they were on person. Whose they were, I don't know. The nighttime ones with the kind of fluorescent blue lights that went so fast. I think having something like that by our military is probably beyond their capability at this point. So I would have to say those are from elsewhere. I don't know where, but I don't think we have anything that can move like that. The last thing I wanted to talk about was, and I sent you pictures of this, is we had a snowstorm blow through here back on New Year's Day of 2004. And I was driving around and I saw it was in the late afternoon, and I saw a formation of clouds, and the sun behind it was just really beautiful. And I stopped, took a digital picture of that. Was playing with it later on down the road, a while, probably a couple of years later. And I looked at it and I enlarged it a little bit, pardon me, on my computer screen. And I thought, what is that? So I enlarged it even more and looked at it, and there's something just above the clouds kind of hovering there that was very interesting to look at. Almost looked circular with some white lights underneath it. And then another object moved up to the right, and I thought, what in the world was going on with that cloud? And I had occasion to be listening to Coast AM and heard a UFO investigator by the name of Butch Witkowski talking about UFOs and stuff. And so I thought I'd get in touch with him and send him those pictures and see what he thought about them. And I did. And he got back to me and said it was real interesting. He was going to have ship it off to somebody he knew that was an expert in analyzing pictures. I heard about it later on. He was on the show again a couple of years later, and he was referring to those pictures. And he said that whoever it was that he had sent them to said that there was 2 and maybe 3 craft in that picture. One of them was shooting a beam to the other one, and I thought that was quite interesting. I couldn't see those things with my naked eye, but they appeared in the picture. So that's kind of a sighting. That's a sighting by way of a photograph. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting thing to discover in a picture that was just meant to show a pretty sky scene.
No, that's really cool. And that's cool about Butch. I miss him being around. He's such a wonderful man. And him bringing it up on Coast to Coast, you're probably listening going, wait, that's my photo he's talking about. That's so cool.
Yeah, no, I heard that show. He was talking about that picture.
If you, and thank you for saying this, by the way, but you say you've heard most all of the ITF library. Do you recall that Jesus Jr. came on and, unless this was on show notes. Maybe it was on show notes. I forget. But anyhow, Jesus Jr. of Breaking Bad came on to talk with me, and he covers UFO stuff as well. And he always talked about, look at the clouds, watch the clouds. They hang out behind the clouds. And he would go out and he would watch and take photos. And yeah, he was just a big believer in these UFOs. They're coming in and they utilize the clouds to their advantage. So I think that's pretty cool. You just brought that story up.
I think I maybe have heard you make reference to that in the past, or somebody on your show.
I mean, who knows with what technology they have? It does seem like it's almost like the Avengers ship, which can turn into, essentially the bottom turns into a mirror, right? And then it just looks like the sky. We've all heard things similar to that, but who's to say that different ones from Mars or Venus or whatever, wherever they're from, other interplanetary technologies utilize different things. So maybe they can, others are more well equipped is what I'm getting at. And maybe some of them do need to utilize clouds.
So I've thought a lot about UFOs over the years, and I'm not sure that they're from our solar system or even our neck of the galaxy. I sort of lean towards their being interdimensional in terms of how they travel, because it's just the speed of light is really a difficult barrier to surpass without being able to warp space. And who knows what technology might exist out there if there are other civilizations that are more advanced than we are. But I tend to lean towards them traveling interdimensionally rather than across space in the conventional sense.
Right, and I do find that kind of silly that a lot of people go, well, it can't be, that no one can get here. That's because that's our limitation. That doesn't mean that's their limitation.
I don't know that they have those limits that we do. They might be working in a different set of physics than we have.
Right.
So those are my sightings.
I mean, I hazard to say that maybe someday. This is another one. Do you still go out and do any hunting or hiking or anything like that at all? And do you have your head on a swivel for Bigfoot?
I haven't been hunting in a number of years, probably 13 years or so. I used to hunt a lot with my stepson. He took his own life a few years back, and so I've kind of gotten out of the habit of hunting. Oh, I went hunting with a friend of mine who was terminally ill with cancer, and so I talked with him about would he like to make one more hunting trip, and so we went hunting up around McCall, Idaho. This was maybe 6 years ago. That's the last time I was out. We went out together, and then he ended up passing away about 10 days after that.
Oh, that was a good last trip then, especially if that's something that both of you enjoyed doing. I'm so sorry to hear about your stepson.
Yeah, that was quite a blow. He was my hunting buddy.
Oh, so sorry. Well, Norm, I really appreciate you coming on and being willing to share. I know that you were kind of tossing up the idea, and I'm really happy that you decided to do it.
Well, I hope it was worth your while. I enjoyed our visit and being able to relate these stories to you.
Absolutely, and then we can continue to laugh about various things online,
So I'll keep you apprised if I see anything else in the sky. I'll let you know.
Absolutely, I surely hope that you do. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.